Hate cards that can get modifiers but aren't bases? Welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and I hope you enjoyed Wednesday's bonus video on the Granny Titan, so go back and watch it if you haven't seen it yet. This is my preview for Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. Yes, that is the official name in the rulebook, and that is also the last time I will call him that on video. So let's talk about the Nightmare faction. Nightmare provides a unique twist on character modifiers, and if you are anti-Disney, I think this is definitely a faction you'll want to reconsider because it is the most novel in the set. It is also the most complex in my opinion. I really like the idea of Nightmare as they feel like an Or faction without the Or. Their character modifiers often have discretely different abilities based on whether or not you control the attached minion. And instead of feeling like a 20 card deck, it feels closer to 26 cards, which is a good thing. There is a lot of depth to this playstyle. For me, Nightmare asks a lot of interesting questions. Is it better to help me or to hurt you? When is the right moment to play certain antagonistic cards? And most importantly, can this faction win? Nightmare has won its games, but it hasn't always been easy. From what I've gathered, Nightmare had been weak historically despite having some really above average cards, and I think it comes down once again to minion inconsistency. For me, the most important minion in this deck is Dr. Finkelstein because of the ability to switch modes of play. Take Monster Garland. If you follow this channel, you know I love the card Daisy Chain because it is negative power that can not only be removed, but turned into positive power. And you have 4 chances to do that with Tinks in the Fairy faction. Here, you have 1 chance. When I've had the Doctor, Nightmare felt great. When I did not, they backed up considerably. Many of the Nightmare cards depend on character modifiers for interactions. We see this with their leader, Jack Skellington, who can give power counters or cards for each one played. Personally, because of the importance of the Doctor, I almost always favor card draw unless my hand is full and there's a real risk to overdrawing. The Nightmare Recruit Halloween Townfolks is like a spy who can draw a character modifier. For this deck, anything that is not mission critical is buried because this faction can be slow and needs key cards to get going. To illustrate the nature of the 2 modes, I want to talk about Zombie Duck Toy, the second most interesting action in the Disney set for me. Zombie Duck Toy has a real choice because increasing your own VP is not always the answer. There are plenty of games where an easy second can win it if you have enough of a lead. For example, if I am losing 10 to 14, winning a 3-1 base and getting 4 VP won't stop me from losing. But turning that base into a 3-0 and giving me a path to catch up will put me back into the game. Compare this with a situation where I'm leading and I want to pad my lead or get that 15th point. Slowing you down doesn't do nearly as much as pushing myself into an auto-win situation. Imagine someone thinking that they won the game only for lock, shock, and barrel to play this card and extend the game. The fact that Zombie Duck Toy scales for both situations is really interesting and makes this a pivotal card, one that Nightmare can strangely recur. In fact, this is one of the parts of Nightmare that is really difficult for me to pin down. What is the balanced direction? You have Sandy Claw's costume, which puts itself on the bottom of your deck, which seems like a good thing in that it recurs itself, which is especially nice since it recurs a minion. But you also have Winter Surprise, which can play an action from the discard, so recurring the costume seems to have been deemed too strong because it's out of range for Winter Surprise. Yet Winter Surprise occurs itself, which is a strange bit of mixed messaging. You can spam the spammer, but not the spammee, so to speak. Similarly, with Christmas Will Be Ours, the idea of borrowing a card only to return it, despite potentially having to dig for it, makes me wonder if that is for theme or balance. I want to stress that I really like the idea of Nightmare, and they can be fun to play, but sometimes it feels like they don't have a play, while at other times it feels like their cards are individually very strong. It's a very odd phenomenon. Sometimes I think that the cards are individually strong to reflect their somewhat situational nature, or the fact that they are heavily counters. To see an example of this, we can look at Oogie Boogie. Oogie, at its floor, moves any minion to another base. You can move yourself or someone else. Yes, the minion will temporarily lose its power, but since you control the destination, you can destroy it immediately. At least I think so. The timing is a little odd because it has an on-play nature and the fact that the card destroys itself, but that's a topic for another time. So one play is to just move something, knowing that it will gain its power back immediately. Another play is to just cancel its power and ability. Another play is to do both. It's very flexible and powerful, like many of the Nightmare cards. But there are also some cards I wonder if the game will come to regret. Ghostly Presence has been discussed as a card that can be really obtrusive, but it's somewhat like Leprechaun with a little bit more counterplay. However, the fact that there are 2 copies does make it harder, especially if you have a Swarm deck, or a deck where every minion was power 3 or less, but it's not like they would put that in the same set. I'm not too worried about Ghostly Presence, but the card I do worry about is Jack-O-Lantern in a box. This card potentially destroys some factions, and many of these factions aren't the type to carry modifier destructions. It feels like an auto disenchant, and I think hurting someone in this case far outweighs the first ever Phase 4 draw card, because that card draw is not protected from the discard step. Out of all the Ore style cards, this is one that feels most like a straight attack, one you always play for a counter unless you knew wouldn't be a factor. And due to the lack of term standardization, it's important to note that this covers any form where a card is physically relocated to your hand, from anywhere, like returning, placing, drawing. You will still draw 2 cards during Phase 4, but imagine this to wizards, locals, etc. This card will hurt. For cards that do a lot of searching, those are now ruined. The other card I suspect that will become a regret is actually the Doctor himself. Given what Nightmare wants to do, the ability to move modifiers between minions of other players does make sense. While I would normally view Monster Garland as one way, theoretically it could be bidirectional. The other cards are mostly one way, especially Ghostly Presence, but I think the part where it becomes too strong is that you can steal other character modifiers. Most of the modifiers are positive, and the control of the card doesn't always matter, like giving power or defense. The Doctor is not only talent-based tinks, but better because you can send it anywhere. This to me is a potentially stronger form of talent-based destruction, which I've said in a previous video that I don't like, because it becomes a deterrent to play modifiers non-terminally, which is entirely their value proposition. Because of the dual abilities, there is a lot of ground to cover with Nightmare, but in general, they have unusual antagonism mixed in with card draw, power counters, power modification, VP manipulation, recursion, and extra plays. They manage to cram a lot into 20 cards, and though it doesn't always feel as fluid as it should, it is still fun. So let's look at some partners besides the obvious character modifier pairings. Immediately, I knew this is going to be a great Elves combo. Monster Garland can negate any 5 to be 3 power, which allows for Flower Child to steal them, immediately getting you an 8. This is a classic daisy chain play with a higher ceiling. Elves tend to give other players more cards, but this ends up being really good for Christmas Will Be Ours. Assuming no monsters are out, they have a nice play with Pumping Iron, where they play Pumping Iron to find out which minion will get 2 power, then move Traveling Elf onto it with Finkelstein, then move the minion to where you want it to go if it wasn't on the original base. This can set up a nice runaway play. With Helping Hands and Zombie Duck Toy, it's quite easy to win a base by losing, no matter how you set up Zombie Duck Toy. Though it's somewhat risky, and I've grown to hate trade. One potentially nasty play is to play trade to steal a card from their hand, play Christmas Will Be Ours to look at their hand, play trade, get an extra action again, and get another card. This puts you ahead of the trade war and gets around the Christmas Will Be Ours clause. Power counters and minion modifiers are a great recipe for runaway overpayments, and mechanically, since both factions want to exploit your opponents, they end up working really well together. Plus, the Elven card draw helps you get to Finkelstein, which is crucial. I can't take credit for discovering this next combo, but I also won't credit the people who discovered it because they made excessive puns last week. However, I did have a chance to try it, and it was brutal. Russian Fairy Tales. The overarching play of this combo was to use the Doctor to transfer Frog Princess to remove someone else's minion and replace it with one of your own, which keeps the Frog Princess in play. One of the worst things about this combo is that you can kill the Doctor, but Russians can get him back. You can destroy Frog Princess, but Nightmare can get it back. Once the combo gets going, it's really hard to stop, and you have the benefits of card draw and deck sifting too with Foolish Magician. But this combo has a lot else going for it. With Zero and the Bewitched, you have the potential loop where Zero stays in play with power, comboing with Finished. The two can cheap trading the Bewitched to have a persistent 9 power. If you are hunting for the Doctor, there are few cards that do that better than Mass Transformation, the most underrated Russian card. With both factions having minion recursion, you can continually play your best minions while milling yours from the deck with Frog Princess. The Great Wolf is also a great target for Ghostly Presence since it basically bypasses the restriction, gives you a power counter, and Russians can offset the negative card draw with Go See My Sister. Finally, when it comes to an extra VP per base score, we have to talk about the first mate. There's something really threatening about gaining an extra VP on a card that stays in play forever. Unless you can eliminate the first mate, which rules out destruction because Monster Garland and a power counter can easily push it out of range. Even without Zombie Duck Toy, you still have a decent way of buffing first mates to do their usual play. But you also have an instant kill with Saucy Wench and Oogie Boogie, so it's nice for a Saucy Wench to actually do something. Zero has an interesting use case in that it allows you to literally cover your bases, not necessarily following the first mates, even though it can also pseudo-follow the first mate for extra power if you wanted it to. The Mayor is a really good Kraken target for persistence since that can follow the first mates. This combo is extremely easy to double score, and if you have Zombie Duck Toy on a double score, you are looking at a 10-4 split, with first mate still out, almost necessitating a counter. Nightmare derives a lot of interesting playstyles from their flexibility, but there is one thing we need to discuss. Zero brought back the dreaded instead of the discard pile clause that was supposed to be deprecated after Marvel. I really hope this is a mistake, because this phrase kills me inside, and a certain French player who doesn't understand pizza recently tried to weaponize it against me. This does prevent a number of nice combos, so be aware of that phrase's presence. They have individually strong cards, and I swear they depend on the doctor, but I still like Nightmare, and I think you will too. What are your thoughts on what you've seen, and who will you play with them? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.